Strength Warehouse presents Go Heavy or Go Home podcast. I am your host, Nate Boley. In this podcast, we talk about strength, fitness, nutrition, and all things Strength Warehouse related. Hey guys, welcome to episode 24 of the Go Heavy or Go Home podcast. Today we have three coaches, Coach Nate, Coach Derek, and Coach Mike, and we're going to be chatting about strength training and Jujitsu. So Mike has a little outline, and he's just going to take it from here.
Yeah, so Coach Mike here. Welcome everybody in Radio Land. Today we're going to be basically talking about what strength training for Jiu-Jitsu looks like, what it probably does not or should not look like for the most part, different methods used, some mobility and recovery tools and techniques, and volume management, which is pretty important.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. You don't want to be like overdoing it in the gym, right? Because then you're going to be taking away from... It's kind of like if you're doing any other type of sport and you're doing strength training too, subsidize that or optimize it, right? You don't want to like go for a max effort deadlift right before you have a meet or a competition. You're going to smoke yourself. Yeah,
just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I mean, especially working towards competition. Like strength training for jiu-jitsu, when it comes to working towards competition, is going to be different than just recreational jiu-jitsu. Your average recreational person is they're just looking to be healthy and mobile so they can train.
Are you talking about average jiu-jitsu client?
Correct. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. Just somebody that wants to come in a couple times a week. Maybe they just want a little self-defense, a little fitness, and maybe just a new hobby.
Sure.
They have no desire to compete. They just want to make sure things don't hurt so they can keep going to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that you would strength train that person differently than somebody who was going to be competitive?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't go too different. I know I don't train differently when it comes to working up to a competition that much. I might get a little bit more intense, might make time domains a little bit more mirrored that of what a competition. So I just got my purple belt recently, which was really awesome.
Congrats.
So my time frame goes up. Blue belt, white belt in most competing bodies that I know of, which I'm still kind of new to the competition scene, is 5-minute rounds.
Gotcha.
I believe at purple belt it goes up to 6, and then it continues to go up from there for brown and black belt.
What is it, 10 minutes or something by the time you're done?
I think at black belt it's like 10 minutes.
I think it would depend on where you're competing. I've done white belt where it's 10-minute rounds, and like that's awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally it's 5. But I think black belt, pretty across the board, is like EBI 10-minute rounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now EBI, for anybody that doesn't know, Eddie Bravo International. Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's basically just like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. It's just the system that is like most widely used, usually in like submission grappling. So there's point style tournaments where you're going for position, and each position has its own set of points.
Gotcha.
So you can compete for 5, 6, 10 minutes, however long it is, and whoever has the most points at the end wins, even if no one gets
it's like it's a scoring platform.
Pretty much, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it's more common in submission only for it to be like the EBI rule set, where it's like longer round, like 10-minute round, and then afterwards it goes to like an arm bar, or you start from the back and then you kind of go from there. It's like the overtime. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of the difference between point style and submission only. Have you ever done points tournament?
I have not. No, I have. Sub League did one that was points. It was not sub only, even despite the name.
yeah. I've never done.
I didn't
points.
get that until just now. Submission league.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Right over the top of the head. I was like, why do they call it sub league? I don't know. It's a cool name.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. All right, so you went into kind of what it is and what isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what it's not is just continuous nonstop circuits with no rhyme or reason of just throwing movements in because they sound hard.
Sure.
A lot of people think, well, because you're going to be going, a little bit harder and heavier, you're going to be, exhausting yourself during the match, that, anything in the gym that you just do for a ton of reps under time, or, or for just high reps, failure sets is gonna suffice. But it's really hard to manage that volume.
Do you guys ever train? I'm sure you guys do at Jiu-Jitsu, but maybe in the gym, controlling breathing, because that's a huge thing when you're going into some kind of like wrestling or any type of conditioning type thing, right? Where you're going to have to, like, your adrenaline's pumping, so your heart's going faster, and you have to move around. So you have to be able to control those types of things, right?
So it's not like that, but also controlling your breath while someone is on top of you, crushing you.
That can be difficult.
That's a big thing in jiu-jitsu. I find nasal breathing in jiu-jitsu has been my best friend, because I've been rolling with like some white belts there.
Yeah.
And then you can tell when they're about to do something because they go
Yeah.
and then they do whatever it is that they're about to do.
So you can anticipate they're going to move.
Right.
Gotcha.
You can hear it. Also, like with the nasal breathing, it's real quiet, but it's also really steady. So you want to try and like conserve as much energy as possible, but even when you are using energy, you want to try and keep that breath steady so that your opponent doesn't know, because like you can hear the breathing.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about that either because I'm not in it.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. Well, something that actually one of our other coaches, Christian, was telling me about was nasal breathing while you're doing cardio. So like I've been doing a lot of that on my spin bike, and then I'm just even like a higher pace walk, trying to only breathe through the nose is harder. It's definitely harder, but I think you get more adapted quicker.
Yeah, you'll see big changes in it pretty quick from just trying to change to nasal breathing. So much so that there's companies like, I think it's called Hostage Tape.
Okay.
Actually sells mouth tape. Yeah, and it actually
when do they get like the ball and like
after our jiu-jitsu classes,
we could totally sell that.
Bring your ball gags,
Ball gags. Okay. Oh man, that's hilarious. All right, so when you guys are, I'm sure you guys maybe have different approaches to it, but what would be something that you'd find in somebody who is doing jiu-jitsu? What would their programming look like? Like, what kind of movements would they be doing?
I would definitely want to see them doing some compound movements for sure, like some heavier compound movements. I feel like for me, getting introduced to jiu-jitsu, I was still pretty heavy into powerlifting competitively, so I was trying to keep up the same amount of volume powerlifting that I was before. Like before I started jiu-jitsu, and I was trying to keep up that same amount. It was just way too much.
Yeah.
But I think I could have done the same exact workouts that I was doing for those powerlifting, like the heavy compound movements, lower my sets, lower the volume total overall, and I would have been okay. I didn't want to do that, so I just switched over to jiu-jitsu completely.
Yeah.
And then actually...
so you're thinking about more like doubles, triples, and singles instead of like multiple sets of fives or more?
You could play around with it. It's hard because you don't want someone to be overly sore going into even just train, like let alone competition. You don't want them to be super sore going into training, but the heavy compound movements will help so much in jiu-jitsu overall. The core strength, all of it will help a lot.
100%.
Definitely.
I think that translates to almost all sports. But
Definitely.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think having an understanding of where you're at makes a huge difference. If you're brand new to jiu-jitsu, probably don't need to train 4 days a week in the gym in addition to your 3 new days of jiu-jitsu, because it is a ton of volume to handle. It's going to be hard to recover from. That's going to keep you out of training. And the whole idea of strength training for jiu-jitsu is to make your mat time better.
Yes.
So taking a look at where you're at and like a good honest assessment, most people could just do well for some just basic GPP work, general physical preparedness, just improving their cardio a little bit, getting a good base level of strength, making sure they have good mobile joints and they can move well. Outside of that, if they're lacking strength in specific areas, building that total body strength up, being more direct with some of those like singles, doubles, and triples.
Gotcha.
And having those heavy sets in there is super important. I mean, you can attest to this, Derek, it's kind of a dirty thing in jiu-jitsu. People think still it's kind of coming around that strength training, you don't need it for jiu-jitsu. And you don't need to be strong for jiu-jitsu. It's all technique. And that is true to an extent. But if everything is level across the board, the stronger athlete is probably going to do a little better.
I was going to say it's probably true until somebody that's strong and has good technique comes in.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they destroy everybody.
Exactly. Then you're in
Yeah.
trouble. I mean, look at Gordon Ryan.
Yeah.
That
No,
dude's
that's
straight
exactly
up
what I was
jacked.
thinking.
You know, he's in great shape. He's also technically amazing. You know, so
Yeah.
you know,
He
he's
lifts a
yeah.
lot.
That's where
Absolutely.
skill and talent and genetics all come together
Yeah.
and make the beast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think,
know.
again, you find that in all sports across the board. And I've never met one or seen one sport where, like, not being generally physically in shape is not better.
Yeah,
Right.
even chess. You know?
Even chess.
You
Because
know?
you could probably play chess longer if you're in shape and healthy.
Your brain's working better.
brain's working better,
Hit
yeah.
that clock faster. That's right. That's right. Hope the clock doesn't get smashed. You break it.
Exactly. I mean, you have, you know, the classic programs, the 5x5 programs. You have your starting strength, and you know, jumps into the lot lately. I'm seeing a lot of the conjugate method. It seems to be really helpful for jiu-jitsu athletes because
Definitely.
it has a high level of like auto regulation. When you're working up to a 1 rep max or a 3 rep max, it's not an all-time best. It is simply what can you do for 3 heavy technical reps for that day and be technically sound.
Sure.
You know, if your recovery is trash, you slept like garbage past couple days, maybe you just trained extra this week because you got something coming up, you might not be able to go as heavy as you normally would, so you have to regulate that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and that
some
keeps you
some
from
RPG
injury.
training a little bit would
Yeah,
help.
definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, instead of just being like, this is the weight I'm supposed to do with a percentage, having
Yeah.
that type of stuff.
I like going the conjugate route with my own stuff personally. That's what I've been kind of jumping on board with lately pretty heavily. You know, looking at doing some type of a max effort lower body day, max effort upper body day. I usually only train 2 to 3 days a week because I am training 5 to 6 in the academy.
Yeah,
same here.
So that's a ton of volume to recover from, especially when, you know, being a blue belt or a new purple belt, all the white belts are gunning for you. They want to tap the higher belt. So,
Yeah, totally.
you know, they're going a lot harder and heavier, and, you know, injury risk kind of goes up a little bit. So you have to make sure that's mitigated with the gym as well.
Sure. Do you think, I mean, obviously, I think like getting stronger, building the tendons and stuff like that, or it's going to help with risks, but or with injuries, but it can also probably make it easier to be injured if you are not mobile, right? If you're just like,
if
if
you're
I
really
came in, I'm super stiff, and I tried to roll with somebody, I'd probably tear something right away. Like, I think so.
Yeah, if your
not-
shoulder,
You'd be at a higher risk,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
your shoulders can't rotate well, like you're gonna get shoulder locked a lot quicker.
Yeah.
You know?
Instead of like all my hair, it's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, fourth of the motion.
Yeah, you know, if you have good strength at your end ranges of motion, you can buy yourself a little bit of time, and you know, might have a easier way of getting out.
Yeah.
It just doesn't come up on you as fast.
So back to my breathing question: do you train any of your strength athletes in that with trying to breathe differently while they're like lifting?
Since I don't work with anybody currently in person, it's kind of hard to give some of that guidance right now. I've been looking into it, trying to figure out how I'm gonna start getting them to do some of these breathing practices. But I'm also learning about them myself because I haven't really used them a ton.
Sure.
I mean, my only real background in any type of breath training was in the military, and that was just for the sake of discomfort. You know, like take a big old drink of water, keep the water in your mouth, go for a run, and try not to swallow the water or spit it out. You know, and then when you're done with the run, then you spit it out. You know, so then you're forced to mouth or to nose breathe.
I would hate that. I would
It
not
sucks.
like that.
Feels like you're drowning.
Yeah.
One of my biggest focuses for running camp actually was you can run faster breathing through your mouth because you're getting in more air, you're getting in more oxygen. I don't necessarily need that. I would want them to go through their nose and keep a steady pace while breathing through their nose the entire time. Is one of the biggest focuses I had.
Okay.
And after, like, on that 3rd week, Josh was like, that felt amazing. And
Yeah.
like it was starting to, like, because your nostrils will expand the more that you nose breathe. So like a lot of people, if they only breathe through their mouth, their nose is like, it feels like they're suffocating just trying to breathe through it normally, like let alone running. But if you can open that up and make it a consistent thing, then it will work wonders for you. And I think it translates really well. It does not translate well to striking. Striking is a different thing, but for jiu-jitsu, breathing through the nose is so helpful.
Yeah.
It makes you aware.
Definitely.
Of not just your own breath, but of your opponent's breath. Once you start focusing on how you're breathing during a match, you can start kind of listening in. If you're on top of somebody in 100 kilos, which is or side control for UFC fans out there. You can kind of get an idea of what their breathing pattern is like. And so if I'm squashing somebody, I'm trying to put the pressure on them, and I hear some rough exhales on one of those exhales, I might squeeze down a little bit more. Now they're not getting as good of a breath in. Now the panic sets in. And so it's like a tactical advantage there.
100%. When do you think that knowledge comes into play in jiu-jitsu? Like, how long do you have to be doing it before you kind of you see people being like, oh, and the light bulb comes on?
I mean, some people, I know plenty of people that are terrible breathers, and and they're blue and purple belts, and
so it's not a common thing then.
No, I think it's going to depend on your academy. If it is something that's emphasized there, it's going to come down to whether or not you are seeking out any training outside the academy, or just your own personal background. Some people have a great athletic background where it was something that was very important, so they just naturally bring it right into jiu-jitsu.
Gotcha.
Some people don't.
Yeah.
For me, there was something, I took this yoga class and we worked on single nostril breathing, like close a nostril, breathe through that one nostril for 5 minutes. That can get really, really hard and you'll feel like you're drowning.
I feel like I'm breathing through a straw.
Exactly. Yeah. And at the first minute, really, really rough. The last minute, you're fine. You feel okay. It opens up. So that was something that I came into it with. But it is a pretty big focus at the gym that I'm at Clark's. It is the nose breathing and like the different cycles of breathing. Like if you are exerting yourself too much and you're still trying to breathe through your nose, breathe through your mouth, or like breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth until you can get calm, like the heart rate down enough to breathe through just the nose.
Sure.
We do a lot of breath hold work as well. I think that's pretty important in jiu-jitsu because sometimes you are not getting oxygen at all in jiu-jitsu. Sometimes they don't have a choke fully synced in, but it's synced in enough to where you're not getting much air. So you're trying to work with the tiny bit of oxygen that you have to get out of whatever that is. Or sometimes they're just smothering you and they're just going like that. You gotta get out of that with no air. So we'll do call them death marches, where everyone just gets in a line and you just walk and you hold your breath for the entire walk, and you just kind of like just do it for as long as you can. We'll do push-ups with breath holds, like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is a pretty big focus for martial arts. I think it's even bigger for striking because it gets really like specific. You want to exhale a certain amount for a punch and a different amount for a kick, and if you're going to throw a combination, that needs to be different.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
And so for those out there in podcast land that don't know, Derek and I are at separate academies. Technically, we're rivals.
You're mortal enemies.
That's right.
Can't even be in the same room.
The friendliest of mortal enemies. But early on in my time in jiu-jitsu, I was still a white belt at the time, still trying to make sure my home was my home as far as academies, and I went and did a trial class over at his academy, and that was one thing that was interesting, is in that intro class that I did. During the warm-ups, there was a big emphasis on, okay, we're going to run some laps, and at the bottom end of your breath, we're going to hold it, and it would hold for a certain amount of time. Then we do some runs.
Basically, you have no air, and you're stopped.
Okay, and then we do the opposite, hold it at the top end.
Gotcha.
I think it brings, again, a level of awareness. If you've never been there before, if you've never been like unable to get even a half a breath and somebody's squishing you,
you're gonna freak out.
Absolutely,
you're gonna freak out.
Panic sets in a little bit more.
Sets in.
But if you're used to it, it's a little easier to manage, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, you've been coaching online now. How many clients do you have?
Currently, I'm working with 2 people. I had 3 at one point. One of them had to drop off for a little bit.
What do you think their biggest wins or things that you're seeing on the mats with these particular clients that you've been working with?
Both just mobility and strength numbers have gone up. I've had a few different people that were starting with, I got a little shoulder tweak, my hip hurts, and just having a good mobility routine in there that works with not just their jiu-jitsu schedule but their lifting schedule.
Okay.
Having 5 to 10 minutes of just a little bit of work, during the end of the workout or even on a separate day totally. I communicate pretty regularly with them, so if they're feeling super rough, they might let me know, hey, I don't know if I can get this lift in today, I'm super sore.
Gotcha.
So instead, send them just a quick mobility plan, so they can just work out some of the kinks.
Cool. Well, does it what's it translating to on in jiu-jitsu for them?
So speed, power, and explosiveness.
Okay.
And just the ability to hold certain positions. Isometric strength is huge in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, if you're trying to hold somebody and they're trying to get out,
Yeah.
you got to be able to hold them, in a position.
Or
enough.
resist.
Or
you
resist,
know?
yeah.
I mean, if they're trying to push on you, that's different kind of isometric than the squeeze. You're now trying to resist something
Now you're
that's
trying to
pushing
push
against.
somebody away.
Yeah, and so seeing
being
some
able
people
to-
last a little longer.
Being able to bench press 400 pounds would help because you could bench press them off you.
Not so much because they're going to hold on to
they're
you, so
gonna
you're
arm bar
kind
you
of
too.
you're giving them your arms.
Yeah. Like,
But
here,
no,
take
I mean,
it.
but in the same sense though, if you're in the top position, you're trying to move from 100 kilos or side control and get up to like a knee on belly position. Being explosive with the bench press is going to help you pop up and get in that position very quickly.
Yeah, that
know.
makes sense. Yeah. Being explosive is good for
Oh, yeah,
all that
good for
stuff.
takedowns.
Yeah.
Box squats are great for building that explosiveness, which will help with all your takedowns.
Yeah.
All your shots. So I like to include a lot of box squats in there with my people.
Cool.
Hitting some type of higher rep stuff is important because muscular endurance is important as well. You got to be able to have that, stamina to be able to last. If you burn out super quick,
Sure.
what good is all that work you were doing?
Lactic acid adaptation as well, being able to flush it out and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. And then just having enough variety. Jiu-jitsu is not the same thing every single time you go. So being able to make sure you can move and still function with different movements and different intensities and different, set and rep schemes is important.
Gotcha.
Different time domains. It's a little bit of everything. It's kind of one of those everything works, nothing works forever. So you have to keep it constantly varied.
Sure.
You
Sure.
know.
That's a little CrossFit coming out of you.
It really is. I mean,
It's all right.
it rings
it's all right.
true.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It does translate.
It does translate to that.
Yes.
When I talk to a lot of people about specific powerlifting stuff, constantly varying doesn't always work.
Right.
Unfortunately, because you always have to be adapting to the newest leverage or the newest weight that you're trying to put on your back. And what really rings true today in the powerlifting world, as it did back then, is volume of the same exact lift.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to end up doing another day where you do constantly varied stuff, so you don't end up being very one-dimensional. I'm guilty of that, but not doing the things I should do. But yeah, I mean, you're not gonna be able to lift 500 pounds if you don't work up to it. You don't feel that weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being able to if you don't work on back squats very often and you just work on front squats or whatever, the likelihood of you getting a really heavy 1 rep max is very, very small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, building, single leg strength and balance is really important. I've seen a lot of improvements in balance. When you're passing somebody's guard, you're not on both feet all the time.
Sure.
And so being able to not fall over is pretty darn important.
It is very important, as is in regular life.
generally speaking.
If you don't fall over, you'll be good. You'll be good. Yeah, and that happens quite often. You step down off a curb or somebody bumps you or something. You got to be able to move on your feet.
Yeah.
Single leg stuff translates to, 2-leg stuff, but 2-leg stuff does not translate to 1-leg stuff.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Sumo deadlifts are another great one.
Okay.
I like to using that wider stance really builds the hips.
Okay, I was gonna ask why, but
Yeah, I mean, it builds the hips really well, builds that explosiveness, and it'll also, that wider stance can have good effects on your narrow stance, so your conventional deadlift can go up if you do have goals outside of just sumo deadlifting for jiu-jitsu.
yeah, big adductor. Emphasis on the sumo deadlift.
Yeah.
So you could get somebody in, squeeze them.
Squeeze them in the guard, absolutely.
Squeeze
Like
them in the guard,
a
squeeze them in
watermelon.
Yeah. I mean, dude, Copenhagen planks is great for that.
Oh, man, I hate
and
Copenhagen planks.
Copenhagen planks are
Oh, and
bittersweet.
Those are the worst. I see people do it almost like crying. I'm like, I hate those. Nice. All right, guys. Well, is there anything else you want to add in there for strength training and jiu-jitsu?
Just moderating volume. If you're starting jiu-jitsu and you're just getting into it, just pay close attention to where you're currently at, how you're feeling throughout your week. Maybe start with just good recovery practices. And part of those recovery practices can be strength training. It doesn't mean you have to go heavy all the time. It just means you have to be in these positions and move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, get in the position, move, build a little strength, get some blood flow.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. Is there people out there that have actual proven programs that work for jiu-jitsu? Or this is just like the wild west of figuring it out?
Yeah, it's still kind of wild,
Right
wild
now,
west.
it's pretty much all of jiu-jitsu is like pretty much still the wild, wild west. I mean, I feel like there's moves and techniques and things that people are doing that they weren't doing 15, 20 years ago
Sure.
that are like now like taking over the game. Like leg locks. Leg locks were not invented until
Just recently.
very, very recently. I mean,
Yeah.
50 years after the nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very recent thing, and now
Yeah.
it's a huge, huge part of the sport.
And
so-
jiu-jitsu is like exploded, kind of like powerlifting, and all these like small,
Yeah.
small little niche things that used to be just like you'd never see a jiu-jitsu gym ever. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden there's hundreds of them now, like all over the country.
I mean, my instructor, my professor, he's from here in Central Oregon, but he hitchhiked his way down to California
Yeah.
to go and find jiu-jitsu because it just wasn't here
Yeah,
yet.
it just wasn't
There was a little bit of dabbling, but there was no black belts in Oregon at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
You know, and just
Yeah.
pursue what he wanted to do. You got to go search it out, so he had to go the old, kung fu route and start walking down the road.
That's cool though.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome. Yeah, but it
Now
is
you
very
can just
much
find
that
one.
Wild
I mean,
West.
there's got to be 5 or 6 of them here in Central Oregon now.
Oh, at
I think
least.
so.
At least.
Yeah.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I would say
exploding.
I think there's like close to 5 in just Bend.
In just
Yeah.
Bend.
2 in
Okay.
Redmond.
Okay.
Almost
And then now
three.
Connection
Almost
Rio is going into Redmond
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, we're going to be opening a Redmond location soon,
That's
or the,
super cool.
the owner is. I'm just there to coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. But yeah, so I know you do online coaching for jiu-jitsu. How does somebody find you if they wanted to meet up with you?
Yeah, so currently I'm getting a website built. Right now, the easiest way to find me is on Instagram, Coach Mike K at Coach Mike K BJJ. That'll eventually change to the company name, which is Grapplers Physical Prep, or GPP.
Nice. I
A
like
little
it.
tie together there,
I like it,
yeah.
yeah, that's cool.
So right now, I mean, if anybody is curious out there and wanting to just add a little bit of strength programming into their jiu-jitsu life, hit me up on Instagram, shoot me a DM, and we could have a little chat.
Yeah, cool. And if they want to come in person, they come down to Strength Warehouse.
That's right. Yeah, come on down. We'll take good care of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
No strangling involved.
No strangling. Well, maybe a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Just
all
the
right, guys.
warm-ups.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on. Always love having you guys on the podcast, and this could definitely segue into part 2. So we'll
Definitely.
kind of work on that and see how it goes.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks
cool.
for having us.
All right. Later, guys.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us on this epic journey of strength. If you liked this episode, please leave us a review and share with a friend. To stay connected, hit that subscribe button. All right, until next time, go heavy or go home.